Welcome back to the Compressor Guru. Folks, I have the compressor. I don't even know what terrible word to describe it, but it has been a pain in the butt. And what made it a pain in the butt was somebody was into it one time that knew just enough to get it back together to make it run, and they sold it. I'm going to run through some pictures here and just show you some of the things we found with it. Was first off, this is a picture of inside the crankcase when we were tearing down. Now, that looks kind of normal, except that is not the correct unloading mechanism for the compressor, because they put it on backwards and left it loose so that it would rotate all the way around without hitting the crankcase. If you notice that this is not, well, I can't even explain it. I wish I would have taken a motion picture of this. The second thing about this was the screws were left loose in the end of the crank, so that because if they tightened this, that piece would have cranked in a little bit more and started hitting the crankcase. These are the screws that were loose, and they were never tightened because the wire that holds them in place was intact. They didn't have enough bolts, so they run a stud in the bottom, and that's okay. That's not a terrible thing, but we did replace this with a bolt when we went back together. Now, here's a big problem. They ruined the crankshaft. The crank on the inside of the unit was fine, but they got a flywheel that wasn't right. They got a flywheel off of 242, and I'll talk more about that in a little bit. But they got a flywheel off of 242, and then what they did is they took and they put a brass bushing in. Well, the problem with putting brass bushing in is this is the old style flywheel, and it has at the top of the picture that square bolt goes in and sets against the key, and you'll notice there's no place for the key. But what they did is they put a little set screw so that goes on each side of half moon key in the crankshaft. And when we go back here and look at the crank, if you look at the inside side where the set screw and the hex screw were, you can see it ruined the crankshaft out there at that end. The high pressure side, one of the valves was broken. I think that's the reason it came in, because it quit pumping. And this machine is internally breathed. If you look at the right here, I circled it. It is the breather, but that should have a tube on it going to the intake, just under the intake filter. And it's just a terrible. Somebody knew just enough to get this together and make it run. So I said I'd talk a little bit more about the wheel later, and I don't have pictures of it because the machine's together and gone. But this is the machine that I think God didn't want back together, because I ordered a 234 brand new flywheel from the warehouse, and it came in. Part number is Fly 234IR, perfect part number. Open it up, it's a 242 wheel. I called the warehouse. They had one more. They opened it up, and it was a 242 wheel. So we went to my handy dandy local machine shop, Patterson Drive Shaft. They're great there. And they made me a proper sleeve to go inside the flywheel with a groove and an extra tall half moon key so that it could be assembled correctly and hold without damaging the crankshaft or the flywheel, and would hold together. That all being said, this has just been a nightmare of a compressor. In the middle here, we're going to show you what I did, because I got the parts and I go to putting the rings in. And, well, we'll get to that, because I did tape what I did and what I did wrong and what I did to correct it. And I'll fill you in here at the end. because the machine's together and gone. Bud screwed up something, and we'll talk about that. But the guru has to fix it. Now, what Bud screwed up, he hasn't done for probably 30 years, and it was on a bigger piston. But Bud broke a ring while installing it. This is a 234 piston. This is the high pressure side. And if you notice that big ring gap right there, from here to there, that's a piece that's missing. And if you notice, it didn't fall out yet, but it should. Now, right there, from there to there, that ring's broken. And folks, Bud hasn't broken a ring probably since the late 80s, putting them in a compressor. And this one got away from me. No, this one got away from Bud. This is the guru talking, because the guru's going to show you something today. And this is going to be one episode, but it's going to have to be filmed over about 48 hours, because we're going to do something to make the next set of rings go better. And I'm going to have to unring this. I'm going to do that off camera. You guys have seen me put rings on hundreds of times. Well, in videos, dozens of times. But this goes away, and I'll put new rings on it. But what we're going to do today is we're going to take a brand new set of rings, and we're going to put them down in the hole for a couple reasons. I've never had to gap rings from this supplier, but one thing we're going to do is we're just going to make sure the rings are gapped properly. But the other thing we're going to do is, see the gap in that ring? Well, it's cold, and it's been in that box for maybe a year, 2, 10, who knows. But if we take and we put them, and I've never had to do this, but I'm doing this because I don't want to screw another one up. But we're going to put the rings in the compressor without, or the cylinder. We're going to put the rings in the cylinder without the piston. And I'm looking in there, and I'd say we probably have 4 or 5 thousandths gap on the end of that ring. I'm going to put this one in. And instead of having a 1/4 of an inch or more, we have about a 5 thousandths gap, just looking at it. And put the last one in. This is the first one I broke. The next one I broke was the bottom ring. This is the 3rd ring down. This is the oil control ring. The next one I broke was the wiper. So this is the oil control ring, and I think part of the reason I haven't broken a ring for so long is because many of the oil control rings are now the 3-piece expandable type rings. This is so small. This is, I'd say, 2 inches across. It's thin this way. It's not as thick as other rings with a larger diameter. And I'm not sure they can make a 3-piece ring accurately as well as they can make the cast iron ring for this. So it's thin this way, it's a small diameter. There is a very nice bevel going into the cylinder wall to load the rings into the bottom of the piston. Now, we're going to come back in about 48 hours. We're going to pull those out, and we're going to see if they've taken shape better. Now, I still have to put them on the piston. I'm going to have to stretch them. But I'm hoping that when we put them back on the piston, they'll conform to that size a little bit better, and then we're going to put them in. But, you know, what I wanted to show you was and I'm not grabbing a feeler gauge, but I just hooked my finger in the end of that ring, and I'd say we got a 5 thousandths clearance on it. Let me put a light on that. We're going to zoom in. By the way, the camera wife had to go take care of her mom. Say a prayer for her. Say a prayer for her mom. Her mom requires 24-hour care, and we had one of the caregivers call off. Her car was broke down, and We've been doing this for a couple years now. If you ever wonder why the camera wife sometimes sounds tired when she's on the camera, it's because she is overwhelmed with taking care of her mother. That being said, so I showed you, I didn't show you, I talked. I'm zooming in. And there. Can you see that gap there? You can see the gap on the next one down and the next one down. And we're just going to let them set in here in the garage and see if they are more apt to take that size and form over the next 48 hours. This is an experiment. I've never tried doing this before, but I broke those rings so easy I couldn't believe I did it. So by the way, I did buy an extra set of rings just in case I break one of these. I pulled the rings out, I put them on the piston and dropped them right in. They went in so easy. I'm not going to, if I ever have a problem with a piston, rings going in a cylinder again, I'm going to put them inside the cylinder without the piston and not let them rest like that for a week, because this worked so good it wasn't funny. Haven't broken a ring for 30 years. I hope not to break another one for another 30 years. I don't plan on being in business quite that long. But this little trick that you saw here through the live video it worked very well. And I just want to wave goodbye to this one. It's fixed right, should render the customer many years of service, but it was one of those nightmare jobs, and I'm glad it's gone. God bless. Have a great day. Like and subscribe. And by the way, we do sell the correct parts usually. This odd flywheel was a very unusual circumstance, but we do sell Ingersoll, Saylor, Beall, Quincy, Jenny, lots of parts, lots of compressors. If you're looking for parts, give me a holler. You can contact me through the Compressor Guru. Thanks. God bless.